Our Friday Five rides again here with co-hosts from the first half hour left over. That would include the Badger, Delegate Michael Haidt. Welcome back, sir.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Former member of the House of Delegates and Vietnam War veteran John Doyle.
Good morning, everybody.
Longest tenured member of our crew, that would be Mr. Michael Carl.
Good morning.
Former tax commissioner of the great state of West Virginia.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. And I believe named Lawyer of the Year several times as well. Don't you have that on your in West Virginia? One of the but it's like the publication they put out about law firms and attorneys with what they do.
My memory is fading.
He was Lawyer of the Year at Bowles Race in Martinsburg.
That works.
I'm proud of that.
I think you have
even though I don't remember it.
Oh, they said all kind of great things about you, yeah. Attorney at law Larry Schultz.
Good to be here this morning.
And via telephone, attorney at law Joseph Joey Torts Ferretti. Oh, wait a second. I got to push his button first there. Joe, you didn't mute yourself that time. I muted you. So.
Oh, you had me muted.
It was almost a mute point. Yeah.
Oh.
You hear people mispronounce that all the time.
I know.
Yes, that's a mute point. Yes, no, it's not. It's a moot point.
It's so
They are
meaningless that you don't even need to talk about it.
The words are similar,
They
but
are.
not identical.
And the word is, of course, similar, as you said, not simular.
I said that, yes.
I credited you for-
similar,
yes, you
yeah.
said it correctly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You did. Just like you oftentimes point out the differences between arithmetic and math.
Yes, I do, because my sister, who was a brilliant mathematician, was constantly pointing that out to me.
As they say, it rolls downhill. Joe, where are you located this morning?
I am in the very dry, parched state of Georgia. We are suffering from a drought, and as I look out my window, I see money being spent because I'm running my sprinklers, and water is very expensive down here.
Sorry to hear that.
It's too bad you don't have some storm water. That gets kind of expensive too, I hear.
Yeah. Schultz is on his game this morning.
Yes. Do you pay a stormwater management fee in Georgia, Joe?
I do not, thankfully.
I do it in
And that's all I'm going to say.
leave it at that. In Frederick County, Maryland, I pay that. It shows up on my real estate property tax bill every year as 1 penny. 1 cent. I think they make up for it in other ways, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's other taxes, aren't there?
I believe they do. When that was passed in Maryland, as it was in Martinsburg here, I remember in Frederick there was a giant revolt against having to pay that fee. So the county commission at the time said, all right, if we have to institute this fee, it'll be 1 penny. And it's been that way for a dozen years. They've never raised it more than that 1 cent.
It costs more than that to print it on the bill, doesn't it?
I'm sure it does.
And they probably hid the actual fee somewhere else.
You're paying it one way or the other.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you are.
That reminds me of a number of years ago when I was selling real estate, and a fellow moved here from Pennsylvania, and I sold him a townhouse. And it was a few months later I ran into him, and he started complaining to high heaven about the high property tax here. And I said, wait a minute, property taxes in Pennsylvania, residential real estate property taxes are higher. No, they're not. No, they're not. And he said, I only pay blah, 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 blah. I says, well, where'd that go? He says, when it went to the township. I said, well, how do you fund your schools? Oh, that's a school tax. I said, well, where does that come from? Well, it goes to the schools. He didn't understand that this was just a separate property tax.
It just depends on what you call it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, what we call him is our leadoff hitter. And to start us off with issue number 1 via telephone, Mr. Ferretti.
Rob, I'm a big believer that history is the best predictor of the future. And sadly, I see a history being relived in this country right now, courtesy of the U.S. Supreme Court. So I want to cover a recent case. September 8th, a decision came down. It was an order off of the shadow docket of the U.S. Supreme Court, which allows ICE agents to essentially racially profile when they're checking the immigration status of certain people in this country. Go back to 1942 when, by executive order, President Roosevelt, following what was termed an invasion of Japanese to the west coast of the United States during the early 1900s, President Roosevelt issues an executive order requiring the roundup of Japanese Americans and the internment of those Japanese Americans in, I think there were about 10 detention centers that were set up across the western U.S. Approximately 120,000 Japanese were detained in these detention centers, and it was estimated at the time and ultimately proven that approximately 2/3 of those detained were U.S. citizens. Now, of course, that was done during wartime, but nevertheless, it was ultimately determined to be a shameful period in our history. In the 1970s, President Carter actually had a commission put together to study and review the government's actions in detaining the Japanese. And in 1988, President Ronald Reagan officially apologized to these Japanese Americans and ordered the payment of restitution to those who were still living but detained back in the 1940s. Approximately $1.6 billion of federal money was paid out as restitution to those who suffered the internment. Now, flash forward to 30 years later, and here we are. A lower federal court and a federal appeals court both ruled in very well-written decisions, over 50 pages, that the act of racial profiling that is now taking place with ICE agents was constitutionally impermissible and should be stopped. The testimony and the evidence in those cases in the lower court levels were that the ICE agents were first pulling aside and stopping and detaining brown-skinned members of society who spoke Spanish and who were found in certain locations, such as Home Depot, car washes, rural farms, places where there's a lot of migrant labor. Those were the only criteria the ICE agents were using to stop and detain these people. And if these folks did not produce papers, if they were not able to prove citizenship, they were hauled away to detention centers. The lower court said that this is impermissible, and going back and citing the incidents that occurred in the 1940s, and said, we don't do that in this country. There's too many people who are going to be swept up who are U.S. citizens and who are unlawfully detained. However, our U.S. Supreme Court, and so on September 8th, vacated the temporary restraining orders that were issued by those lower courts, and the U.S. Supreme Court essentially stated that they'll wait for the full case to come up for review by the court. But until then, the activities of the ICE agents that I just outlined can continue. So here we are, after a terrible incident in this country over almost a century ago. Here we are repeating the same mistakes. And now we're doing it with an ICE agent that's recently fortified with new funding and new personnel under the Trump budget bill. We've got clear evidence that these ICE agents are operating under quotas and the pressure to apprehend so many people in so much time. And now we have a Supreme Court that is sanctioning this kind of behavior. So my question to the panel this morning is, are you concerned about a Supreme Court that sanctions this kind of behavior? Are we overstepping constitutional protections by picking up brown-skinned people, detaining them, and requiring them to produce papers? Or is this just another government overreach that we have to be concerned about going forward and that we have to hope is remedied at some point through the court system?
Let's start with Michael Carl. Michael.
Well, I ultimately, when the when the Supreme Court, does the full-blown review and ruling on the matter, we'll get the explanation. But I agree with what they did, and keep in mind that these are facts. The fact that if you don't have proof of citizenship, and you meet the descriptive issues that we're talking about, the skin and so forth, the language. These are facts that are legitimate to protect the United States and the security of the United States. It was back in World War II, and it is today, because there's tensions and threats that can't be denied. And I believe the Supreme Court was right to push back on the ruling initially, but we'll when they have the final ruling, I'm sure that we'll have an explanation of that you can't deny facts if you're going to protect this country.
I have to ask, what would be sufficient in asking to prove citizenship if you were directed by an ICE agent to prove citizenship? Joe, Mike, anybody know?
Yeah.
Well, a birth certificate for one.
Well, I don't travel with that, though. Is my
Right,
point.
exactly.
Very few
That's the
people do.
point.
Yeah. So what is proof of citizenship?
A voter registration card would be one.
I don't know about that either.
You're not required to vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's not like Australia where you're required to vote.
But it's an absolute 100% connection to citizenship legally.
Yes, all voters are
But
citizens.
you don't. Yeah, I don't.
All voters are citizens, but not all citizens are voters.
Yeah, I guess the question that you're trying to ask is how do you explain that you are a U.S. citizen? How do you if somebody detains you, if somebody were to detain you, Mike, how would you tell that officer, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen?
How would I tell them?
Yeah, how would you prove it?
I would describe the facts of my life, and I have some things that my birth certificate being one of them.
But you don't
But
travel
you're not
with that.
carrying.
You don't carry that. But the defense and protection of the country comes ahead of those inconveniences that you're talking about.
Well, but hold on, Larry, one
Yeah.
second. I asked this question with particular interest because I look around the room and I don't see a lot of people here who probably tan real well in the summer. But as a younger man, right, being of Sicilian descent, and I had dark hair, dark facial hair, and when I tanned, it was not uncommon for me to be more tan, darker than many other people who have skin pigment, right? So the question is, and I've been in Miami and people came up to me and began speaking Spanish to me like I should know it. And I'm not making that up. So the question
They
is...
weren't working for ICE, though.
Not at the time. They may be now. But if I was 25 years old and it was August at the end of the summer tanning season and I was confronted by an ICE agent and said, prove that you're American, how would I do that? I can speak English, but so can people who are Hispanic. So how would I prove that I'm an actual natural born citizen of America?
Well, the things you carry around are
I have a driver's license.
okay. I mean,
And I have cash if they take a bribe.
but the point is that the security of the country is an absolute maximum priority, and the rights of people who are in this country, whether they're citizens or not, is important, but it's not automatic, and it's secondary to the security of the country itself.
I was going to say that suppose I just moved here last year from Ireland and I'm not a citizen. Am I going to be part of a group that gets collected? Hey, you're Caucasian. You're probably not a citizen. I don't think so.
Could. I mean, and you're right. That is probably not going to happen. But let's say that there was a large corporation that was headquartered in Ireland that set up shop over here, and within a year of setting up shop, there were a large number of people that came over with visas or whatever from Ireland. Is it impermissible, or would it not be okay for ICE to come in and start checking visas at that particular facility? Just because you're Caucasian, it shouldn't have anything to do with it. Most of the people from Ireland are going to be Caucasian, and we've seen a similar thing happen in South Carolina with the Hyundai plant.
They were brown skinned.
No, they weren't. Absolutely not. They were.
Many of them were.
They were South
Korean.
or South Korean. Thank
That's
you.
brown skin.
South
As
Koreans
opposed to
are
black or white.
brown.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that I
that's
would-
brown skin.
Okay, all right. I wouldn't describe South
I've heard
Koreans
them
as
use
brown
the word
skin.
yellow once in a while.
However, ICE came in and started checking South Koreans for their visas, and a lot of them were detained. Does ICE do their job? Immigration and Custom Enforcement. How do they do their job if there aren't certain things that they have to look at? And it could be in the case of South Carolina with Hyundai, they're coming in looking for a certain group of people that were given visas and now have overstayed those visas. They're not going to look for a Hispanic person. They're not going to look for a black person. They're not going to look for a Caucasian. They're going to look for an Asian descent, someone of Asian descent, and start asking them questions. And I don't know what the answer is, Joe. I mean, this is a difficult job for Immigration and Custom Enforcement to do, but they have to do it somehow.
Larry Schultz.
Yeah. Let's be clear about something. What Joe's talking about is there's already plenty of Supreme Court precedent that says person's skin color and the tone of their voice or the accent with which they speak or their inability to speak English are not sufficient to detain a person, not a citizen, a person in America. We've said that for a long time. This is a departure from that. And it doesn't surprise me that the people who are being hounded this way are people who look different from the average white American. They don't, in fact, to use your example, go to look at Irish companies to see if those white guys in that Irish place have all their visas and all their documents in order. They don't do that. So the reason is race or race-adjacent cultural sort of differences. And, this is the government saying, because of how you look and speak and that you don't have a big pile of birth certificates and visas in your pocket, you're getting detained. Not just given a warning and you might have a court hearing in a month. You're going to a prison. We don't do that in America. At least we haven't for a long time, as Joe said, and we should not be doing it. The damage to this country caused by that nonsense is way greater than any damage that would result from being more thorough and honest and less intrusive in the way you do it.
Okay, so how does ICE do their job?
Okay, well, first of all, take the masks off. Show us your face. Okay.
Well, stop doxing them then.
Well, this is. I have a question to talk about today about what happens to police officers, and a lot of it is unjust. I bet you the people they're detaining are not the ones doxing them. So you're just going to punish these random brown-skinned people because some clown in another state is seeking their documents? They're American police of one kind or another. They need to have a badge on with their name
and a number
and a number so that you have a reason to think, other than just the police bulletproof vest, you have a reason to think that this is actually a police officer.
But their vest says
kind.
Police across it.
Yeah,
FBI.
so what? I can buy one of those.
Yeah.
Come on.
When there's 30 of them running around, I would have to tend to think, all right, maybe they are police. Maybe they are the FBI. Maybe they are ICE.
And are you willing to go to jail on that basis? Because that's what we're talking about. They're putting them in jail without a hearing. For crying out loud. This is American freedom.
And you said some of this is how people react. If
Yeah.
In Rob's case, if he were in Miami and the police stopped him and he just looked at the police and said, you best get the hell out of here. You don't have any right to detain me. Police may think twice about it because obviously this guy knows his damn rights now. It's not somebody cowering and saying, well, I don't have – there's a difference in how people react.
There are a whole lot of
and if you look at all the mass immigration across the southern border, it wasn't a mass immigration of Caucasians coming across the southern border. So if you see all these immigrants coming, why would you?
When my family
why would
came
you
here,
look at for Caucasians when you saw the mass amount of people coming across the southern border illegally? We're not Caucasian.
Well, when my family came here, as far as I've been able to determine, they came from Germany and they were white.
How'd they come?
They came on a boat, I'm guessing, and they came through
New
customs, right?
The legal way.
But you can't tell by the color of a guy's skin or his accent that he didn't come there legally.
One of the weaknesses, I think, of your argument is that most of the people in this country who are here technically illegally didn't come across the border. They came here legally with a visa and ended up overstaying it, sometimes knowing so, sometimes not knowing so. And that's why I use that example of somebody, if I moved here from
Not knowing?
Oh, sometimes, yeah. They like, hey, there are times when I have missed notification to renew my driver's license, and I discover a couple of months later I better hurry up and go do it. This happens to people. Now, one of the things, a little anecdote here. Some of you may have heard of a military unit called the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. This was in World War II. It is the most highly decorated unit in the history of the United States Army. It was made up of what were called Nisi, sons of Japanese Americans who had been locked up as a result of Roosevelt's order.
Joe, it comes back to you to close it up. You've got 100 seconds.
Okay. Well, look, it's the scope and it's the wide sweep of the government action which is problematic here. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution requires a reasonable suspicion that a criminal activity has taken place, particularized to the individual under suspicion, not wide sweeps of people so that we weed out who's legal and who's not. When a call comes into the police that a Hispanic or an African American is terrorizing a community with a gun, we don't go arrest all the blacks or all the Hispanics and then weed them out. That's what's happening here. And so I think this is a dangerous situation to argue that ICE has to be able to do their job by allowing these wide sweeps. ICE has to do their job in accordance with the Constitution. And that's what the Supreme Court missed and hopefully will remedy soon.
Joe, as always, a great leadoff. You spurred vigorous debate. And during the commercial break, we'll see who runs to the bathroom first. Now we move on to issue number 2. And in the Bill Stubblefield seat this week is Mr. John Doyle.
I was a lieutenant, not an admiral.
Nevertheless.
Nevertheless.
You're an officer. Officer and a gentleman.
Yeah. And we started off the show this morning talking about the Berkeley County Commission. So I'll now throw out an action or lack of action last night by the Jefferson County Commission. The Jefferson County Commission met last evening, not yesterday morning, and a major topic on the agenda was a proposal once again to weaken the zoning ordinance in Jefferson County. There have been several of those that have come up recently, and in the public comment period, there were about 65 people there. In my public comment, I just said, folks, you all keep doing this, come up with these proposals to chip away at the zoning ordinance, and there have been enough of them that I'm beginning to suspect that somebody wants to do away with zoning. Now, I can't prove it, but I suspect it. And at any rate, I had to leave before they actually got to it. I left after the comment period because I had a Zoom meeting last night that I had to be home for. But I did find out that they decided not to adopt the proposal, which was a proposal to do away with the concept plan as part of the zoning ordinance. And I also suggested that having a concept plan is one of the pillars upon which a sensible and effective zoning ordinance stands. And if you pull away that pillar, you run the risk of the zoning ordinance collapsing. What they ended up doing, I did find out later, is they did not adopt that proposal, but they adopted an alternate proposal of 4 different things that they think might streamline the procedure. And I got no problem with streamlining. But one of them I think is not going to work, and that is one that would say that you adopt the concept plan and the site plan at the same time. The problem with that is you can't really do a concept plan until you do a site plan. So I guess it's okay for them to come and discuss them concurrently as opposed to consecutively at different meetings. I guess they can do that. But I do think they have to be separate. But at any rate, I say this because it is interesting. I am convinced that zoning was adopted in Jefferson County, I think something like 30 years ago, and a whole lot of people opposed it. Now, if you tried to do away with that zoning plan, there would be peasants with pitchforks out there. The funny thing about zoning is that initially it is opposed by people who think it's going to restrict the use of their property, but after you've had it for a while, the majority of the people think it's a good idea because they realize it actually protects their property from infringement by people with property nearby. So I throw this out as I do think, incidentally, this has become a great exercise in public participation in Jefferson County since they have moved to this brand new palace, which I commend the county commission for doing. There were 65 people there, and it was very comfortable. It's in a room that holds about 250 now, whereas previously, if we had tried to show up in that little room underneath the Charlestown Library where they had the county commission meetings before, where if you got more than 30 people, it was crowded and you couldn't breathe. Anyway, so I just throw this out, and I would like the observations of our panel on not just zoning in Jefferson County, but zoning in general.
That's the old American Public University System building that they moved into, correct?
That's one of the 2, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of them. Very good. All right, do they have zoning in Morgan County, Larry?
No. No. I don't know what they'd use it for if they did, frankly. The first thing I was going to say is I live in Morgan County. Jefferson County might as well be New Zealand to Morgan County. That's okay. We don't know anything about Jefferson County. Let me say this,
doesn't border us. We don't know.
As a general concept, when I hear about government officials pushing to change a particular law that involves a whole lot of real estate, I can't help but wonder, does someone have a financial interest that they are trying to better by making these changes? Like I say, I don't know the people involved, and I couldn't say who was on which side of the fight or why. But that's the number one suspicion that jumps into my head when I hear that there's a zoning plan in place and they're trying to weaken it. I would want to see exactly the parts they're trying to weaken and then make some guesses about who might make money from those parts being weakened.
If I could quickly elaborate on that, one of the commissioners began talking about, well, actually, the concept plan, you cannot deny, this is what this commissioner said, you cannot deny approval for a development at the concept plan. Another commission said, oh, yes, you can. And a third commission said, wait a minute, should we be talking about this? Because this is the argument that Sidewinder is using, now Valor Reserve, is using in its lawsuit against us. So should we be talking about this? And the attorney said, yeah, you shouldn't be talking about this.
So we're talking about that.
Yeah, is the key issue they can't discuss. Oh,
Yes.
boy.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, I think, John, your question is about zoning in general, and zoning has always been the means to, I guess, segregate conflicting land uses, right? I mean, to have business development in one section of the county, and to have residential rural development in another section, and to have those types of living arrangements or business arrangements live harmoniously. That's always been the goal of zoning. Now, where it gets to become a problem is when there's restrictions on land use. But to me, the great paradox of zoning is that an individual landowner wants the freedom to use their property as they see fit, but they don't want their neighbor to have that same freedom. Because that's, to me, has always been the tension that exists in the debate over zoning. I think Berkeley County is a good example of some of the ills that are visited upon a community when there isn't zoning. There's been development in Berkeley County which has become problematic. Just go down to exit 12 and try to navigate that area. It's becoming a problem. Too many people and too many developments for too few roads. So I think the planning aspects of zoning help in the long term. But as I said, if you're an individual property owner, you may see things differently. So that's always been the tension. I think Jefferson County probably in the long run has benefited from having zoning. I'm a little dismayed to hear there's an effort to weaken those rules.
Mr. Carl.
Well, I have to say I agree with a lot I just heard about the role of zoning. It's clearly a function that has a back and forth but that it exists at all is recognized as legitimate, and because of the law firm that I'm associated with and the wide range of clients and varied interests, even among them versus each other, I have to be very, very neutral on specific zoning rules, but the concept is something that's acceptable. It's just a matter of refining the rules to accommodate legitimate interests of property owners.
Mr. Height.
Yeah, I was with Mr. Ferretti there 100% until he got to exit 12. So and let me
traffic lights.
yeah,
Joe, go back to exit 5.
Let me explain that.
I spent a month at exit 12 one day.
I agree that if you look at Berkeley County, the whole concept is we want the freedom to do what we want with our land without our neighbors telling us we can or can't do something, whatever that might be. And I think that's why in Berkeley County they have fought against zoning for so long. Jefferson County is definitely a different animal over there. They want to control every aspect of what's going on in Jefferson County, including what their neighbors are doing. As it pertains to exit 12, Joe, and here's where I disagree, that had really nothing to do with zoning. When you talk about the expansion of commercial and or residential development in areas that the infrastructure won't support it, we have checks in place that are not utilized properly, in my opinion. The Department of Highways has the ability to say no to certain projects if they think it will overtax a particular infrastructure, a road, a bridge, whatever, if they deem that it's going to be burdensome, or they can tell the developer, you have to develop other things with the road. You have to widen the road. You have to put in lights. You have to do all these things to improve the infrastructure in that area if you are going to develop. I don't think they utilize their authority the way they should. I think it's the same thing with the water department. They have the authority to say no if they think that the water capacity is going to be overtaxed. And yet in Berkeley County, we never say no to anything. We never question, the Department of Highways never questions any development on any road, no matter how much traffic it's going to increase. And you can look at Route 9 as a great example that I think is overburdened by the development and continued development. And Route 9, when I say Route 9, Route 9 West, between I-81 and Berkeley Springs, I think is overburdened, and we have not done enough to remedy that, and it's because of the explosion in growth out there. So, you know, I think when it comes to zoning, I'm against zoning. Actually, I'm for liberty. Do what you want. If it's your land, if you don't want somebody building P&G beside you, then buy the land so P&G can't.
America, land that I love, stand beside her and guide.
The election's
Guide
coming
her
up.
with zoning regulations.
Yes, yeah. Hey,
Back to you, John.
the late State Senator Sandra Lucht, who died very tragically not too long ago, had what I think is the best explanation of zoning in one sentence: don't put kitty litter in the living room. That's what zoning is for, to keep kitty litter out of the living room.
I will say that I drive to this show from Berkeley Springs every early in the morning every Friday, and I think the record I've had of waiting for red light in Hedgesville was 5 cycles. You know, you can tell the cycle of a red light when the cars, you know, come the other way, and there are other things. You get to move ahead a little bit, and I've had 5 cycles, and it's fairly common. I think if it happens to be green when I'm getting close, then it's not very much. But if it happens to be red, or there's some kind of construction, God help us, then you can do 5 cycles waiting for a light that you can't even see because the road curves and stuff. Mm-hmm. They built like 10,000 homes, and nobody stepped up in the process of building those homes to say, hey, perhaps we need a road. Now, I don't care if it's a zoning panel or the Department of Highways or the state legislature. Whoever it might be, they need to do something about it before they build the houses.
And the next time that happens, we'll be the first.
Yeah.
I think the roads follow the growth. They don't precede the growth in most cases, other than interstate highways, which lead to growth. But otherwise, the localities are always trying to catch up. All right. Thank you, John Doyle. We move on to issue number 3, and that would belong to Delegate Michael Haidt, the Badger.
All right. I'm going to go on to a more national issue. And my question is, does the recent canceling of late-night hosts Colbert and Kimmel begin a dangerous precedent against First Amendment rights? And should the FCC have stayed silent in this issue?
Mike Carl.
Well, the decision was a private sector decision. The people that run the show was intervened. Now, so I don't think it's a legal question, but I think they did the right thing. But that's my personal opinion. But and I'm not a stockholder in that business. But I don't I don't think that there's you can point to the clear involvement of government regulation.
Joe Ferretti.
Mike Carl, I'm going to disagree with you. Yes, I'll agree with this point. You're correct. It was a business decision by Nexstar and Sinclair, the broadcasting conglomerates, who decided to force ABC to take Kimmel off the air because they were not going to run his show on their networks. But it became a business decision when the FCC chairman explicitly stated hours before the decision was made that the FCC was going to visit this issue of Kimmel and his comments about Charlie Kirk's death and was going to, in their words, take action. The phrase used was, as the FCC, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, which is an explicit threat that those networks better do something, or this planned merger that Nexstar wants to accomplish with other network conglomerates was not going to pass muster and was not going to get the blessing of the FCC. So yes, it was a business decision, but it was a business decision imposed by a government regulatory agency. That is not the way it's supposed to work.
Larry Schultz.
As confirmation of what Joe was just saying, you know who didn't get canceled? Brian Kilmeade at Fox News. When he said on September 10th that in a discussion about homeless people, that perhaps the idea would be to jail them and give them a lethal injection. And then as someone expressed shock with their face, he said, yes, kill them. 6 days after Brian Kilmeade said that, gunfire erupted at a homeless encampment in Minnesota, and 7 people were wounded. I'm not hearing anybody say, oh, wait a minute, that's way too far to go. That's unbelievable. You can't do that. And, of course, so now the FCC is going to start meddling in the affairs of Fox News. The fact that that's not happening is all the evidence you need to understand what is going on here. They are using the federal government to leash private corporations so as to cause them pain or deny them pleasure in such a way that if they fire Kimmel and Colbert, they can have what they want. That's what it's about, and of course it is devastating, especially given its one-sidedness.
John Doyle.
I'm not a lawyer, other than my 3 previous predecessors in commenting on this, but I watch Law and Order a lot, and periodically, I hear lawyers or people playing lawyers on television come up with an argument called the fruit of the poisonous tree. Brendan Carr, the chair of the FCC, poisoned the tree. So therefore the fruit is poisonous. I think if he had said nothing and nobody in the administration had said anything and ABC said we're canceling Jimmy Kimmel, everything would be fine. It would be it's perfectly their right to do that. But they exercised a right into which they very possibly were intimidated into exercising. So it's wrong.
Back to you, Mr. Height.
Well, let me explain the difference. And before I do that, let me first start by saying what Brian Kilmeade said was a fireable offense, and he should have been fired immediately for saying so. And that's somebody from the right saying that, sure. Okay? I agree with you. Inexcusable. The difference is one is cable and the other 2 were not. What you can say on cable and what you can say that's on public airways that is controlled by the FCC are 2 different things. Fox News is cable. Kimmel and Colbert were on ABC and CBS. And what they were saying was over public airways, which falls under the control of the FCC. and the FCC has the right to get involved and investigate when it's said over public airways. Now, Colbert wasn't canceled on his cable show. He was canceled on his over the airways CBS show. And therein lies the difference. Now, should FCC have gotten involved? If you're going to get involved, then go ahead and get involved. You don't have to announce it to the world. Just do the investigation, because it does influence other things and other decisions made when you make it all public. I think they should have gotten involved, but I think they should have gotten involved quietly and investigated. And if they saw something wrong after the investigation, then take action. If not, then keep your mouth shut. I think we publicize these things way too much sometimes. But there is a difference between what is public airways and what is on the radio airwaves and what is on cable. And we have to recognize the distinction between the two.
A minute left. Any further comment on that, Larry or Joe?
The only other thing I would say is I'm not sure about that distinction, but taking it as true, that still doesn't excuse the federal government leaning in on late night comedians who have one aspect of the thing and not leaning in on other organizations.
One is cable. They have no authority over the cable network.
So the Fox News Channel could show porn. They could show graphic porn or the Epstein files, whatever you want to call it.
The FCC does not control that.
Well, I got a feeling somebody from the federal government would lean in.
Somebody may,
they
but
don't
it's
want
not
to.
the FCC.
Okay.
The free market controls that.
And I agree, Kilmeade should have been fired.
I think the precedent has been set. Let's see if it's enforced both ways. We move on to issue number 4. Larry Schultz, you are on the clock. Welcome back, Joe. Joey Torts ready by telephone as part of our Friday panel. Joe, welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome. Also, John Doyle in the Bill Stubblefield chair. We traded an admiral for a lieutenant.
Yeah, you traded down. Definitely traded down.
Mr. Michael Carl.
Good morning.
Delegate Michael Heitz.
Good morning. Good to be here.
And with issue number 4, attorney at law Lawrence Schultz.
Statistics show us that responding to domestic violence-related cases is one of the more deadly threats local police and police officers in general face on their jobs. 5 York County, PA police officers were shot this week while trying to serve warrants in a domestic violence case. 3 died, 2 are critically injured. I believe the suspect was firing an AR-15. What more can we do to protect our officers from this trauma? And when I say that, every cop, everywhere in the United States, and probably in some foreign countries too, when they hear this story, they think about all the domestic violence calls they've appeared on. And when they get a call the next day about a domestic, they must be horrified. And of course, there's a couple of things that it seems to me are impacted here. Number one, their job shouldn't be horrifying, but it is a very difficult job, and I guess it can be at times. But secondly, if you're terrified when you go into a situation where you might have to do an arrest, then it could be that the way you treat the people at the arrest scene, including the victims, could be affected by your horror and your fear of this terrible trauma. What do you suppose we can do as a nation, a county, a state, to try and ease this back a little bit?
I remember in college taking a police community relations course from a guy who was City of Pittsburgh cop. He was on the north side, which, Joe, you probably remember back then, the north side. They used to call that like the Ward District. That was the toughest part of the town. And he said Westbrooks was the guy who taught the course. And I remember him saying, of all the calls that police officers respond to, the domestic violence call is the worst one because it's so unpredictable. The very people you are trying to protect may turn on you at any point during the course of that confrontation. And that's why it is the least desired call that a police officer gets, other than the obvious horrors and abominations of some other things we won't get into. But and I have many friends, as do all of you in this room, who are police officers, and they will pretty much all, to a person, tell you the exact same thing. Joe, let's start with you on the telephone.
Yeah, and Robin, to give this situation, this horrible situation in Pennsylvania, a little more context, right off of your comments about the north side. North Cadorus Township is where this occurred, and I'm very familiar with that area. My wife was born and raised in that township, and it is a very rural area in Pennsylvania. It's, in fact, there's Amish that live there. It is definitely Trump country. It's farms, it's horse farms, it's soybean farms, and small communities. And this has to be very shocking to those folks. And of course, it is a real tragedy for the Pennsylvania State Police. As to what can be done, I've always been interested in the police union's positions on gun regulations. They've pretty much, been on the conservative side in terms of supporting the Second Amendment and advocating for less gun regulations. And I've always found that interesting because, a society that's armed to the teeth is their problem if they have to respond to certain members of society in very stressful or dangerous situations, as apparently these state troopers encountered in Pennsylvania. I'm heartened by the fact that I see police unions now adopting support for red flag laws. Apparently there were reports from family members that this was becoming a dangerous situation with this individual who was known to be armed and threatening. You can perhaps only speculate whether a red flag law would have helped here, but I'm heartened by the fact that police unions are becoming more supportive of those sorts of interventions that you hope will diffuse situations like this and protect these officers. But it is a difficult situation that they encounter every day. We got to make sure they have the resources, the training, the equipment to protect themselves. There should be no questions asked about their request for those kinds of resources. And I hope that going forward, we'll continue to have that mindset.
John Doyle.
I agree with you completely, Joe. Full disclosure, in my last term in the legislature, I sponsored a red flag law. I was the sole sponsor of it. I spent about 3 days after that bill was introduced, other than being in committee and on the floor, on the phone with people who had called me, threatening me with all kinds of nastiness. And every one of them, I returned the call and attempted to reason with them. I don't remember anybody I persuaded. There were some who said, okay, I respect you for returning my call. I don't agree with you. I think you're crazier than hell, but I respect you for returning my call. I do appreciate the fact that police forces and individual officers around the country are now coming around to the idea of a red flag law. You can write a red flag law in such a way that it respects someone's individual right. Because I did.
Mike Carl.
Well, I completely agree that enhancing the red flag law would be one of the constructive responses to this kind of a problem. But I think that even more so would be to greatly increase the penalty of misuse of weapons, of firearms. I think all this Second Amendment belief and love is fine, but I think we need to have even more serious criminal penalties for misuse of firearms.
Mr. Height.
Well, that's always been my concern with red flag laws. How do you write the law? and still not take away an individual's rights. I would like to see the law that you wrote, John, and see how that accomplishes both tasks. The problem I see with red flag laws is that my neighbor can get mad at me because I blew grass on his lawn when I was mowing, and then he makes some kind of call to the police, and the next thing you know, they're showing up taking all my guns. And that's, you can say, well, that kind of stuff doesn't happen, but yes, it would if there were certain kind of red flag laws. And I see that happening now with certain domestic things. I've seen it happen personally to individuals that are family members, because I had to go collect the guns from their home and put them at my home just because someone made a complaint to them, and the police showed up and made them remove all the guns from their home. Now, this individual had done nothing wrong, and yet he had to remove all his firearms from his home. Now, they were returned in time, but that's not the point. He shouldn't have had to remove them from his home to begin with. And I think we start down a very slippery slope with red flag laws if they're not written properly. I don't know how you would write it properly. I'd love to see your legislation.
Let me see if I can go. It was from a number of years ago when I was in. I'll see. I think I can probably get it back, and I'll get a copy of it and show it to you. What I did when I wrote it was based on, at the time, the Arizona law, which was of the half a dozen states that had red flag laws, the most solicitous, shall we say, of the individual whose firearms would be taken. And it had several roadblocks into taking them. I threw in a couple of more roadblocks before you actually could take them. And then when you took them, you could only take them for, say, like 10 days, and during which time you had to prove that the person shouldn't have had them. So I do believe, and let me put it this way, I'm a member of the ACLU, always have been. The ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, strongly, intensely opposed the passage of this bill of mine. And I looked at the executive director. I said, "You really think this bill's going to pass?"
The problem I have with the scenario you're presenting, though, is you are taking, even for 10 days, you are presuming guilty until they prove their innocence for 10 days. Yes, you are, because you're taking away their...
You didn't listen to me. Prior to taking it, there were several roadblocks you had to go through. And I think it had to be, again, I'm going from memory here. It was something like 2 weeks before you could take them, when you had to prove this and that and the other and all that. It really threw a whole lot of roadblocks in there.
I will say that I think there's a problem with society's mental health problems as it's attributed to firearms, and that that's where we need to get a handle on things. When people are deemed to have mental instability, should they have weapons? Probably not, and that is probably where we need to delve into this. And it seems to me like this guy, I mean, if we're talking about domestic abuse, so obviously there's a history of violence there. And if there has been a long history of violence, then maybe somebody should have been looking at taking the weapons away from him long before this incident happened, if there was a history of violence in that home.
But you can't do that without a red flag law.
I don't know that you need a red flag law, but you need a law.
Well, that's a red flag law.
No, I think red flag laws are a little different.
It says, here's a red flag.
It sounds red flaggish to me, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know.
Now, that's not the only contradictory statement Mr. Height may have made in that last sentence structure there. Mr. Schultz, would you like this one?
Yeah, I'm sensing a desire for due process of law prior to the deprivation of American rights and the deprivation of rights of people in this country in this discussion that we did not hear when we were talking about ICE rounding up people because their skin is brown and they have a Spanish accent.
I'm all for due process. Absolutely.
Well,
in both cases. cases.
Putting them in detention without a court hearing is not due process of law. It's just not. And you're saying, well, can't take his guns till we have a whole big court proceeding. Okay, I want to get back to the topic I was talking about. I have some ideas. For one thing, is there anybody within this range of my voice who hasn't been pulled over by a cop and been a little snippy with the cop, or been a little like upset that the cop pulled you over, right? And then you go tell your friends and blah blah blah. Perhaps all of us, we're not going to commit gun crimes, most likely, but one of the things we could do to help these police officers is be a little more empathetic toward them when they pull us over, even if we think they are dead wrong, and that we are totally innocent of all wrongdoing. Another thing we can do is other ways of supporting officers and letting them understand when you see one who's your neighbor or whatever, that must be really difficult, showing some empathy to them that way. The third thing that I think of is, and this isn't a red flag, but it would be registration of guns. Mr. Charlie Kirk, the recently departed commentator, had a big argument about how, we have 50,000 auto deaths every single year. Nobody's asking to ban automobiles. Okay. Those deaths are largely negligence-based, not intentional. Whereas with firearms, the vast majority of deaths, it's because you wanted the person to die, not because you had an accident with your gun. But that's one big difference. But another one is every single automobile, if it's allowed to be driven on the roads of this state, has to be registered with the government. Now, it would take me a while to register my guns, but I would be willing to do it if the police believed that might make them a speck more safe.
Can you tell me which amendment allows us to drive? Yeah, I didn't think there was.
Well, there's not a specific amendment because there weren't any
exactly
cars
right.
when they wrote the thing.
Because no, that's not why. Because
That is why.
No, driving is a privilege. It's not a right. That's why.
Okay.
Owning a firearm is a right. Why is it a right?
It's also the right of the government. Owning an automobile is a right. You have the right to buy an automobile, whether you can drive it or not. I agree with you, it may be a privilege, but you can buy an automobile.
Sure.
You still got to register it if somebody's going to drive it on the road because you're the owner. And so that's a rule. How about if we just had a registration of all these guns? Then when someone calls in and says, my ex-boyfriend is a nutlog and he's been texting me and coming after me, the police could say, give me his full name one time and look up to see how many guns the guy owns.
Now
then they could check it out.
We got to stop here because if not, we're going to run out of time for Mike Carl and issue
Sorry.
number 5. Michael?
Okay, and you brought up the name just a minute ago. Which is worse for the Democratic National Party's national interests? The election of Kami Mondami in New York City as mayor, or the assassination of Kirk?
Say that again. Which
is worse?
Which is worse for the Democrats?
As it plays out among the
Political
country.
interest,
Now, 1 minute apiece, John Doyle.
I don't think either will have that much effect because I think the elections in 26 are going to depend almost entirely on what the economy looks like this coming July. And incidentally, Mamdani, correct pronunciation, is not a commie. He's a socialist. There's a difference between communism and socialism. Socialism is an economic philosophy. Communism is a political philosophy. So,
thank you, Mr. Doyle. Mr. Schultz.
Yes, I don't think either one of those things is going to have much effect at all, largely because of what John said. We're already seeing the beginnings of stagflation in this economy. And let me tell you, already hamburgers $5-6 a pound. If it keeps going up and people start losing their jobs more and more, as appears to be happening, then nobody's even going to remember who Mr. Mamdani, including in the city of New York, most likely, who he is, because he doesn't have any control over either of those things. And so I don't see that either one of them is going to be particularly hard. If I had to pick one that would be worse, it would be the second one, not Mr. Mamdani.
Joe Ferretti.
Well, I would hope that the death of Charlie Kirk would not have anything to do with the possibility of the Democrats gaining some foothold in the federal government in the future. I don't see any connection at all there. But with Mamdani, I think the Republicans are adroitly requiring prominent Democrats to either publicly endorse or not endorse his candidacy. And so that's a stickier wicket, I think, for the Democrats going forward. And so they're going to have to be light on their feet in terms of how they deal with his candidacy and probably ultimately his election. But I agree with the other comments. I don't think in the bigger picture there's going to be much play for the Dems going long term.
John, and I don't see why this is a problem for Democrats to distance themselves from Mamdani and say, no, I'm not in favor of a socialist being elected. I don't see as that being any more of a difference than if you remember when David Duke had his candidacy, excuse me, and many prominent Republicans were distancing themselves from David Duke. It should be simple. If someone says, do you favor a socialist being elected in this country? Every Democrat should say no. I favor a Democrat being elected.
I'm a Democrat. I abhor socialism. But the voters of New York have a choice between a socialist, a crook, a sexual abuser, and a gang leader. Who are you going to vote for? I don't know.
Which is the worst, the socialist?
In your opinion.
Yes.
Mr. Haidt.
So I guess the question is, which is going to hurt the Democrats the most? I think it comes down to elections. And when we're talking about elections, I think the assassination of Charlie Kirk hurts the Democrats more, because elections are about getting out your base and influencing the middle, the independents. And I think that many in the middle, independents and all on the right, were terrified by an just unbelievably upset by the murder of Charlie Kirk. And that will rally the base, that will rally the middle, and that will hurt the Democrats long term. The Mamdani thing, that's going to take a little bit longer. If he gets elected in New York, you will see the decline of New York even further, and that will take time before that effect is felt.
Comes back to you, Mike Carl.
Well, I think the assassination of Kirk, while the factual connection with Democrats is more ambiguous, I think it's broader and deeper, and that'll be the worst.
Were you going to say something, Mike?
No.
You leaned toward your microphone. I thought you had a thought.
No.
All right. Panel, I thank you kindly for your participation in today's program. Pick up your checks and validate your parking on the way out the door.
Do we need to show a visa to get that?
No, birth certificate.
Or a green card.
Or a Visa card, maybe.
Mr. Hornby accepts cash.
Or Venmo or Cash App or
whatever you have there in your pockets. 8 seconds apiece for closing thoughts when we come back to final thoughts on the phone with Joe Ferretti. First 8 seconds, go.
In the name of economic development, the state of New Mexico is now offering universal health care, child health care, to all its residents. There's an idea worth looking at.
Larry Schultz.
I just want to make it clear that I've been to both Jefferson County and New Zealand, and I like Jefferson County better.
Mr. Doyle.
Tomorrow at 10 a.m. in Shepherdstown, a parade to celebrate the Constitution of the United States.
Mr. Carl.
If the Cards can't take a series from the Reds in St. Louis, they have no chance for the playoffs.
Mr. Haidt.
Yeah, I don't know. Can we all just get along? I don't know.
Thank you, Rodney. You had 8 seconds. You
Calmed down.
This is why he gets
Whatever.
burned all the time.
Dave Ramsey Show's coming up next. This is Talk Radio, Denver on Martinsburg and TV 10. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again in 70 short hours.